Good evening and welcome to The Strand. I'm Christina Foxley, the Director of Events, and I'm pleased to welcome Sean Manning, editor of Bound to Last, 30 Writers on Their Most Cherished Book, and contributing authors David Hajdu, J. Courtney Sullivan, and Anthony Swofford. Bound to Last is a tribute to the book as object, and each of the 30 writers in this collection shows us the variety of ways that any one book can impact a life. Books do have wills of their own, asserts Francine Prose in her piece on Andersen's fairy tales. They migrate from room to room, they lend themselves to friends, they fling themselves off a shelf at us when they suspect that we need them. I'll let Sean talk more about the book and introduce the authors more formally in a moment, but first some logistics about the event. Following tonight's discussion, they will sign copies of their books for you, which you can purchase downstairs on your way out of the store. Depending on our time frame, they may be reading and talking for a while, which is great, but if there's time, they'll certainly take questions, so we'll play that by ear. Please join me in welcoming David Hajdu, J. Courtney Sullivan, Anthony Swofford, and Sean Manning to the Strand.
Right there. Appreciate all the hard work you've done in this book. And my agent, Jim Fitzgerald. What can I say? Really, you're amazing.
Say more.
You said it for me. And I want to thank, let me see here, of course, the three panelists. And I want to thank the Strand. This is a really special place for me. When I first came, one of the first trips I came to New York, I was in college. I was like a sophomore in college, and I had just changed my major from history to English, and I was visiting a relative here at the time, and he took me to the Strand, and I remember walking in, and it was the same feeling I had when I walked into Toys R Us when I was like 8 years old. It just blew me away, and it left such an impact on me that when I finally moved here a couple years later, the first thing I did after finding an apartment, which took 2 months, was I applied for a job here. And I can still remember Miss Bass, the owner, giving me, you have to take a quiz when you work here. They give you a quiz, you have to match books with author and this whole list. And I blew at least 3 or 4 of them, but she gave me the job anyway. And I worked here for about 9 months. And that's what my essay is about. And it's about this book, Ulysses, which I bought here, and I still have the Strand price tag in there, which I have about 100, 200 books that still have the price tag in. And I bought it, or it was scanned on was July 7th, 2001. So, and it was, the special thing about it was, when you buy a book at the Strand, I don't know if it's still the case, but you're only allowed to buy like 6 or 7 books, or 5 or 6 books at a time, as an employee. You get everything 50% off, but and you can only buy on 1 day of the week. I think it was Friday. So if you find a book, let's say on Saturday or Sunday, you have to take the book and you store it down, at least down the employee shelf downstairs. I don't know if they still be downstairs, but down in the basement. So I found this book, it was like on a Monday, and I set it aside on the employee shelf, and I went back on Friday to get it with a couple other books, and I looked at it and I was like, what the hell happened to my book? And if you can see, like, there's, the binding is gnawed away on the edge, and mice had got to the book. So, and then the weird thing is, I talked about in the essay, like, I don't know why I bought it anyway. I still was like, all right, well, that's, I guess it was, I was meant to write about it in this book. But, and the other cool thing about the Strand, which they don't have here anymore, was they used to have bag check downstairs. So when you come in, you leave your bag with some of the employees, and they'd give you a claim check. And they had numbers on the claim check, but they also had authors' names. And a lot of the authors were people that had worked here, like Luke Sante was an author. I think Paul Auster was one of the authors. I don't know if he's worked here or not. What are the authors? Patty Smith. So you had all these authors that had worked in the Strand, and every time somebody gives you a bag, you're looking at them constantly. I just remember thinking, what a dream it would be to have my name on a bag check ticket. And now they've gotten rid of the bag check, so that will never happen.
There is bag check at the register.
Okay, voluntary. All right, but this is the next best thing. So I want to thank the Strand for having us. the main reason I want to do this book was because of the whole ebook versus old-fashioned book debate. Not a lot of people were talking about books as mementos, as keepsakes, as mile markers in somebody's life. When I look at my bookshelf, I don't just see spines, but I see places where I've lived. I see people that have given me the books. I see the jobs that I had at the time, all of those surrounding things. And so I thought, well, I'd gather 30 of my favorite authors to write about a book that they own. And it's not necessarily their favorite book, but it's the one as a physical object that means the most to them. So that is, in essence, what sparked the book. And one of the great essays in the book is Courtney's. Well, they're all great. But speaking to the point of somebody giving you a book and what that allows you to remember that person. And I want, Courtney, if you'd read from the first few paragraphs of your essay, or maybe, you can talk a little bit about your essay and then read.
Okay. You're coming up on your 10-year anniversary.
Yeah.
With Ulysses.
I'm
That's
coming
so
back.
exciting.
So give me that employment application ready.
That's very exciting. Well, my book that I read about was The Portable Dorothy Parker. And I've been lugging this book around with me everywhere I've gone since high school. I guess maybe I'll read the opening drafts a little bit and then talk about the book. Oh, one thing I noticed reading through the anthology myself was how many of the essays are about people moving to New York in particular, and sort of early time in New York when you've known in your own little corner of the world forever that you want to be a writer, but you have this vision of doing that in New York City and what that means. And a lot of times a book is what kind of gets you there or helps you out when you're first there. And that was definitely the case for me. I had highly romanticized the Algonquin Round Table and everything Dorothy Parker ever did, even though she had a miserable life. It still was so fabulous to me. So that's what this is about. The book was a 16th birthday present from a witty and eccentric high school friend named Arden. She was only a year older than I, but she had much older siblings, a fact that gave her an air of sophistication. She was that friend every teenage girl needs to steer her in the right direction, to put the world in some sort of practical order. Woody Allen, he's really, really funny. Stirrup pants, you just can't wear those anymore. For my 14th birthday, she had presented me with a book on scandals of the Amish, which I cherished. For my 15th, an oversized tub of Brussels sprouts wrapped in lingerie, which I hid under my bed. When I turned 16, that day when one is supposed to be festooned with pink ribbons and sugary icing flowers, Arden arrived at my door with a thick, unwrapped paperback, the Viking Portable Dorothy Parker. The cover intrigued me, a black and white photo of a pretty, short-haired woman with dark eyes, looking broodingly, longingly off into the distance. Dorothys are people, Arden said with assurance. I nodded. We weren't really the Sweet 16 type. That's how it opens, and then...
when I finished that essay, I wondered, do you still keep in touch with Arden, or do you know what's happened to her?
She lives in New York, actually. I should have invited her here. But we're, Facebook friends, but that's it. But maybe I should tell her about this. I think initially I had her in as a weird friend, which I changed to eccentric friend, in case she did end up coming around. Arden, are you here? Good night. But weird in a wonderful way, obviously.
Right. I really loved your essay because, if you'll excuse me from reading this from the paper, because I am so fucking nervous right now. But I really love so many things about the essay, and one of them is you talk about the shorthand that you use to annotate the book. An exclamation point meant ha, something was funny. If you put a check mark next to it, it was I wish I'd written that, which I think everybody can relate to. You talk about how the book, you didn't read the book chronologically, but you kind of jumped around in different points in your life, certain passages and types of her writing jumped out at you, the poetry in high school, the short stories when you were in college, and the book reviews after you moved to New York. If you could maybe talk a little about that.
Has anyone here read Dorothy Parker's book reviews? Because they are amazing. Can I just read you a paragraph from one of them? Okay. This is so good. Actually, I don't know which one, but well, here's a little example of my crazy underlining. I think there's even like a heart on this page. Embarrassingly so, but there is. Let's see. Well, this is just a little paragraph. His latest book, Breakfast at Tiffany's, is a collection of a short novel, or if you wish, a long short story. I promised my mother I should never use that wretched word, novella, and several short stories. The long one, the title story of the book, concerns an extravagantly unconventional young lady, entertaining to read about, certainly, but the reader, though the author and the characters in the tale in which he places her admire her vastly, has always the feeling that to know the young woman would be to find her a truly awful pest. That of course is no criticism. It's doubtful if Hamlet would have been fun to be with on the day-to-day basis either. I mean, it's amazing to me to read these. She's writing about John Updike, she's writing about Capote, she's writing, I mean, just incredible books, and to read her reviews in sort of real time as these books were just being printed, which went on to be such classics, I just absolutely love. And of course her real gift was for ripping things apart, and she does that so well with theater reviews and book reviews.
But you also talk about, which I love in essays, is you talk about the difference between her criticism and the snarky blogger crowd that was kind of coming up, and you know how she kind of fused that line between totally malicious and valid criticism.
Right, and something I realized when I came to New York was how many other young women came here with the Dorothy Parker dream in mind. You know, I was the only girl on my sort of suburban street reading Dorothy Parker, but there were a lot of girls on a lot of suburban streets all over the country doing the same thing and having the same dream. And maybe 5 or 6 years after I moved here, I got to have dinner with a writer I really, really admired, who's a woman in her mid-30s. And I got there maybe 5 minutes late, and she was sitting at the table. She was reading the portable Dorothy Parker. And she said, you know, I'm rereading this for the 100th time. And, you know, we were talking about it, and she said, you know, we all kind of wanted to come here and sort of like write like her, but not necessarily live like her. And I think there's something about young women today with this sort of, you know, type A personality who still long for that kind of wildness that she embodied. And so as we're sort of carefully like paying our student loans on time and only drinking 1 glass of white wine, we're sort of just glorifying everything she did in excess.
Right. And I was going to ask you about it is because there's a new portable Dorothy Parker, which I don't know if you've seen.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting, tying into
with
the
the
essay.
caricature.
Yeah, and it's like a cartoon of her.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious because I think what's interesting about this is that, and you talk about, if you just read and the part on page 88, you talk about her seeing her photo.
Page 88.
When you had moved to New York. So,
oh yeah. Okay. After graduation, I moved to New York. I lived with a roommate in a small and charmless apartment across from a fire station, and felt more or less lost in this vast, fast-moving city. Some days I'd look up while riding the subway, and it would hit me, not in a pleasant way. I live here. I often doubted whether I had the pluck to survive, and since I had few friends, my beloved books became even more important to me, though the only place I could fit them was piled up in the closet. I sometimes stand before them, my eyes running over their familiar spines, dozens of novels and biographies and poetry collections nestled in between my bathrobe and my suitcase. A select few, maybe 10 or 12, got to live outside the closet, and the portable Parker made the cut. Its contents were a reminder. You're here to be a writer. This is the city you've been reading and dreaming about for so long. Dorothy's picture on the front cover was a reminder too. Oh please, she seemed to say, quit your whining and just get on with it. You're tough enough.
Which is something that if you have the new edition,
yeah,
you don't get that.
At all. And there's something so